so happy that Mother Nature cooperated and just didn't give us a beautiful sunny day, because weekends, actually, most of us are, we can do what we want to do midweek. I see by the most of the age here. I gotta say, it's great to know that I know about a quarter of the audience. This is a wonderful turnout, so thank you so much for coming out, and great marketing. You did a good job.
Thank you.
So my talk today is mostly to introduce you to the birds of our area. How many of you guys would consider yourself birders? And by birders, raise them high and proud. By birders, we're talking, you have a bird feeder, you put feed out once a week, or you're crazy and you hear that there's a rarity over in Chemung County and you go run and go chase. So you got the extreme. And notice I also said, are you birders, not bird watchers? When I do my bird surveys, 95% of my identification is by sound. And it helps being a musician. On my bird walks that I do in Catskill at the Ramshorn Livingston Sanctuary. And if anybody's interested in coming on these walks, I do a 6 to 7 week series in the spring. I can give you my card, shoot me an email, I'll put you on my list, and you'll find out about all going on. I have a woman on the walk who's a former principal violist for the New York Philharmonic. Now, we put words to what birds are saying. Robin saying, cheerily, cheery up, cheerily, and you'll hear all these later. She was calling out musical pieces and saying, oh, that sounds like Mahler's Ninth. Okay, well, to hear it's going, da, 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 da. So it's a little bit taking it to the extreme, but it's wonderful how we can take one aspect of our life and continue it into another. Things that are making our lives easier these days. You guys have heard of the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. It's like the repository for anything birds. Audubon has the big name, Audubon, the bird in the word. The Lab of Ornithology, in conjunction with Audubon, came out with an app called Merlin. It's a free app. It started off as a visual identification tool. You take your phone and you try to get a picture of a 4-inch bird as close as you can get. So, and then you try to zoom in. So it worked. It was a modicum of success as the visual identifier, and people still use it. Over the last 2-3 years, they've come out with the sound identification module. Oh my goodness. Okay. So you can keep
You
Merlin,
know what you're looking
keep
for.
Merlin on while we play bird songs and see if I got. I'd say it's going to put me out of business as a consultant, but it's 95% accurate. Well, 90 to 95. I'm doing a project in Dutchess County now, and what I'll do is I'll get to a site and I'll take an assessment of what I'm hearing. Then I'll put Merlin up. As a musician for 50 years, I have a slight hearing loss in my right ear, and there's one frequency that if there's a wind, just wind, I don't hear a flycatcher called an eastern wood pewee. It's not even that high pitch, it goes, but it gets masked by any background noises. So just about every place I stop, I put up Merlin, it always pulls out pewee. So I go, okay, let me wait for the wind to slow down, let me not hear any rustling, and then I'll hear the pewee. But what it does is it jars my attention to what I possibly am missing. So I was at the site last week, and I heard the symphony of birds, and I heard a very strange, kind of like a squeaky mew sound, almost a mournful sound. I looked at Merlin, and it said common loon. Now, where do we find loons in June? Raise your hand. In the Adirondacks, right. Not in a grassland in Dutchess County. Next thing I know, the cow gave a typical moo. It picked up the sound, this call that a cow was making, and said it was a common loon. So, with a little knowledge and common sense, we can say, no, Merlin, I think you got that wrong. But I highly recommend downloading Merlin. I've been doing this for many, many years. I still take the time in the spring to tune my ear and listen to bird songs. There's a couple of series. There's a series called Birding by Ear, to tell you how far back I go. It used to be on cassettes. What's a cassette?
Yeah.
Then it went to CDs. Now, who's got CD players in the car anymore? Everything is downloads. But it's a great resource. And then, if you want to share what you're seeing, I mean, everybody has their life lists. I was just talking to Sylvia, and she asked me, how many birds do I have in my life list? I've been so busy, I don't know. I've got lists, but they're usually in a notebook. So if Don has his list of birds that he's seen in Cairo Freehold area, and somebody's coming up from Queens and says, I want to go birding in Greene County in the Cairo area, I wonder what I'm going to see. Well, there used to be a program called Birding Buddies. You could go online and find somebody who's in the area and say, hey, I'm coming to your area, what can I expect to see on June 15th? With eBird, which is another lab of ornithology program, you can upload any sighting anywhere in the world. So that's great. All of these birders who have been birding for years have uploaded all of their sightings. Obviously it takes time, but once it's on eBird, you have eBird too? No, right. Once it's in eBird, that's one of the benefits, that now you're sharing what you're seeing. The query aspect of it, of asking what bird am I going to see in Cairo, New York, in the middle of June, you can explore, you can research, and if there's a specific bird you're looking for, you want an ivory-billed woodpecker, forget it. You can put in a species that is on your list, and it will pop up places, and then you can use that as a wonderful resource. So don't be afraid to enter birds on eBird. If you put something in that is totally wrong, there are reviewers, you'll get a gentle email. Or if it's a friend of mine, a not so gentle email. Are you crazy? The exclamation mark. Are you sure? And then you'll have to give proof. Just like any rare bird alert that used to be done just by letters and mail. So take advantage of eBird, data in and data out, and look for Merlin. They're great resources. So I'm going to talk about the commoner birds. Birds are still singing. They're still active. The breeding birds in our area are still active through June. Why do birds sing? Content of the bird. What are they saying? Look at me. Look at me. This is my territory. So they're establishing a territory. They don't have thumbs, they can't put up no trespassing signs. So they're going to sing from the four corners of their territory, attract a mate. And they also have another vocalization. They have calls. Calls are not as melodic, typically, as their songs, and that's to keep a group together, to warn of danger. So birds are still singing. We still have a really wonderful symphony if you're up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And listen to the symphony, roll back and go to sleep. So I have slides, they're mostly all of my pictures of the common birds. But before we're going to start with feeder birds first, because that's how I've constructed this program. I used to do a program just on feeder birds, and then I kept expanding. We go into all the colorful guys in our area, and we'll get into raptors and some of the larger birds. But before I get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about climate change. I don't want to wade too deep in the muck on it, but I'll just give you a little background. Can anybody tell me what fire tower that is? Stump the audience. I did a talk for the Catskill 3500 Club, and they said, do you have any fire tower pictures? This is Hunter Mountain.
Hunter Mountain.
Yeah, so it's just an introductory. Okay. We'll go backward. There we go. Now, as long as technology works, we're in business. So to give you an idea of how long I've been doing this talk, and I think the last time I spoke with you guys was right when this report, the Audubon Birds and Climate Change, came out. This was in 2014. And the dire statistics on here, over half of the species in North America potentially will lose up to 50% of their range by 2080. Let's fast forward to last year, and the case for protecting habitats, which is the most important way to save birds, is protecting habitats. All habitats except for one, the birds will be experiencing losses. It's very wordy, you don't have to read all of it. The bottom line is the only group that has been expanding has been waterfowl and ducks, because there have been major investments in wetland, in prairie potholes out in the Midwest, up in Dakotas. We have done, the federal government has spent a lot of money to protect the wetland habitats. So the data comes from breeding bird surveys, Christmas bird counts, lots of, as it says, 33 different organizations and agencies contributed. So based on this graph, everybody except for dabbling diving ducks and water birds, they're all suffering major declines. The largest group are grassland birds. Anybody, farmers?
Sure,
Used to be. That's the story of grassland birds. Hayfields were a wonderful place for grassland birds. When did you typically cut hay?
June.
June, too late. What we're finding is you need to cut hay right before Memorial Day. Get that first sweet cut, and then let it go through the summer. That's going to give the grassland bird species the opportunity to breed. There's nothing more heartbreaking for me going past a hayfield in the middle of June, end of June, and seeing it's been plowed. There's the bobolinks, the meadowlarks, savanna sparrows. Unless they were able to run past the machinery, that brood for that year is gone. So the recommendations that have been made between New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, is this regimen of mowing your first cut before Memorial Day and then waiting till at the usually August 1st or August 15th. And what we recommend is if people do have fields, is you do an assessment. You go out and go look around. Do you still see birds in the field? Well, if you still see birds, then we're going to hold off. And I know so much plays into it. I don't want to pit birders, conservationists against farmers, because we can all work together. But as long as there's communication, it can work. This is basically what I'm saying. So tipping point species, these guys have lost 50% or more of their populations in the past 50 years. And we're seeing probably a 30% decline in overall bird numbers in the last 45, 50 years. So the bird populations, and it's not, as Sylvia alluded to, it's not because we're still eating birds. It's not, we're not in Europe where they're still eating songbirds. And all of our songbirds, our migratory birds, are protected to the point that you cannot possess a bird as common as a robin, unless you have permits from the federal government and from New York State. You cannot possess any birds, bird parts, bird nests. Back in the early 1910s, there was the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which affords all these protections. The invasive non-native species, starlings, those you can do whatever you want to. But just about every other bird that doesn't have a hunting season associated with it is protected. So if you've got a little feather collection, got a blue jay feather, got a robin feather, ooh, I've got a red-tailed hawk feather. If a conservation officer wanted to be by the book and came into your house, he could confiscate that and fine you for possessing bird parts. Because they don't know where you got it from. Did you kill the bird to get it? Yeah. So as we found with the water birds, habitat protection is what's leading the benefit to the species. So there are several programs that have been going through Congress to try to help the birds. This legislation, then there's, so the MBTA from the last administration, they were really trying to gut the protections. Unfortunately, one big protection that just got voted in is stream protections. I don't know if anybody's read what just came down from legislature, Congress. The Army Corps of Engineers used to regulate certain streams up to Class C. Now this new regulation says that unless a waterway is directly connected to a larger body of, a navigable body of water, that means a larger boat can go in it, they're not getting the protections that they've had in the past. Luckily, we have DEC. I look at DEC for better or for worse. They do really good things, but they're so short-staffed that a lot of things fall through the cracks. But we've got DEC's protections, so there are wetland permits that are needed and stream permits if you're going to be affecting any of these water bodies in development. The Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act, that's a fund that gets donated and gets populated money-wise every year. So one of the things that I do with our chapter, the Audubon chapter, Northern Catskills Audubon, it's a very quiet Audubon chapter. I don't mean vocally, I just mean actively. There aren't a lot of active members, but we have about 400 members. So when I write letters, advocacy letters, I leverage those 400 people. Say, on behalf of the 400 member Northern Catskills Audubon Society, we would appreciate your support for whatever legislation. So keep an eye out for those protective legislations and make sure you vote. Okay, on to the fun
Dark-eyed
stuff.
junco.
Okay, so one of the more common birds that we'll have at our feeders in the wintertime is the dark-eyed junco. Nickname is snowbird because it'll come down to our areas in the wintertime and moves up north to breed and also moves up elevation-wise to breed. So you'll find them up in the Catskills, but you're not going to find a junco down here with us flatlanders.
Black-capped chickadee.
Now, wait a minute. Doesn't a chickadee say chickadee-dee-dee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
This whistle is the chickadee's song. And there's the chickadee. So that's why you'll hear the chickadee call more often because they're more actively trying to keep their group together or warning when they're coming around your feeders. When you listen for that dee-doo, that's their song. The white-breasted nuthatch. Anybody know the nickname for a white-breasted nuthatch? Which way is he facing? He's the upside-down bird.
So that's down there. That's it?
Let's see if I can get this.
Red breast.
No, I don't want you yet. So that is the cousin. Mother Nature is amazing in how every niche is covered as far as foraging for food. Picture a tree. You've got the tree trunk, you've got bark, you've got branches, you've got leaves. You go back to this guy. Don't say it. Thank you. The upside down bird will work the trunk of a tree head down. So as we all know, bark isn't linear. Bark has lots of cracks and crevices going in all different directions. The benefit for the nuthatch is she's going down the tree, can find any insects that are hiding in an opening that's aiming up. There's a little bird called a brown creeper. I don't think I have a slide of him. That works its way from the bottom of a tree. It'll start at the bottom and spiral around the tree and work its way up. So any insects that are hiding on those downward facing bark crevices will be found by the brown creeper. Then we've got the nuthatches, the chickadees, who are using the branches and the leaves. So the whole ecosystem of a tree is being used, looking for food. Speaking of food, I guess I'm giving away the answer. I feel this is Jeopardy. Why do birds migrate? To get to the other side. Other side of what?
The climate.
The food supply. Yeah, birds, so far all the birds that we've seen here are local residents. They'll be here through the winter. There are some birds that are half hardy species that will stick around in our area in the wintertime if they have food. But migration is driven by food supply. All of the birds that you go out and you really want to see, the real colorful birds, they're all insect eaters. Where do the insects go in the winter? Don't say in your house. Between ladybugs and, but all the food for these guys, they all disappear in the winter. So the birds, they're not leaving because they're cold. They've got the best insulation out there. It's not Primaloft. They've got down, they've got feathers. So they leave because they need to find food. And interestingly, what drives them to migrate, it's not weather phenomena. Weather events help in migration, but they're driven by length of day, the amount of daylight. So that leads us to a whole other phenomena of listening to birds that typically sing in the spring, because that's when the breeding takes place. They're setting up their territories. In the fall, when they're ready to migrate, they don't need to set a territory up. They're already done. Kids are done. They're out of the house. Yeah, good luck. Don't come home. But in September, the length of day is very similar to the length of day in April and early May. So the birds that have been singing powerfully and really emphatically looking for their mates in the spring, they'll be singing. Some of these guys will sing in the fall. And it's so much fun listening because they don't give you the same authoritative song. Because they're like, I'm just going to do this to practice. They'll play a white-throated sparrow who we see here in the wintertime, but when they're coming through, heading up to Canada, where they're going to breed, they sing a song and said, Old Sam, Peabody, 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 or Old Sweet Canada, Canada, Canada. And in the fall, and we hear them in the wintertime sometimes, they'll go, oh dear Canada, Canada, God, we have to do this. So this is going to be on the quiz, by the way. When you signed up, you saw that there was a note that said in order to get out, you have to pass the quiz. The two-word term for what this is. And we'll hear frogs, spring peepers. We'll have to call them fall peepers. We'll hear gray tree frogs in September. I love this. It's called autumnal recrudescence. Everybody say it with me. Autumnal recrudescence. That's the scientific name for birds and other animals singing in the fall. So listen for that. And if you want a card, you can call me up. You can send me an email and say, I heard a bird singing in my yard. It's September 15th. Are they going to nest again? And then I'll send you 2 words back. Autumnal recrudescence. Boy, do we stray or what? Okay.
Red-breasted nuthatch.
A little tin horn. They're not as common as white-breasted. These guys love conifer forests, higher elevations typically, and they will show up. They'll show up in our, come on already. Stop. They depend on pine cones more so than other species. So if there's a really good crop of pine cones or spruce cones, they will stay in northern areas, northern regions, the Adirondacks, Canada. But when the cone crop crashes, which happens, everything is cyclic. If that crashes, we will see red-breasted nuthatches. There's a suite of other finches that will come down to our area when their food supply crashes up north. And those are called eruptive, IRR, eruptive species. You don't have them every winter. You don't have them consecutive winters typically, and it's food driven. So last year was a great year for red-breasted nuthatches in our area. Not so good for them because they had to travel very far. They were seeing them down on Long Island in August. Typically, winter species show up October, November initially. You have a question?
Do they go down the tree also, like the white breasted?
Not as much. Not as much. Yeah. But they will exhibit that behavior.
Tufted titmouse.
We like to put words to what birds are saying. This guy's saying, Peter, 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 Peter. So in trying to identify, ooh, that sounds like a cardinal too. As you get more adept at identifying and listening, you'll train your ear to listen to the different tones. The difference between a flute and a piccolo. The pitch is higher on the piccolo, but it's got a whole different timbre, a whole different tone. And now we're getting to birding 303 instead of 101. That was a scolding call.
It was a scold?
Yep. In fact, when we try to attract birds, when we're out in the field, I have two weapons that I use to try to attract birds. Number one is simulating the scolding call of a tufted titmouse. It's called spishing. You go out and you hear something, you hear a chip note in the bush, you'll go psh, 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 psh. And you can do it quieter, and we have a 30% chance of it attracting the bird. A 30% chance of the bird hearing the alarm and saying, uh-oh, I'm out of here. And then a 30% chance of it going, I don't have to worry about it. So it's worth trying to do. Used to be called pishing, but for those in the know, pishing has a whole different meaning. So if we do the spishing sound for tufted titmice, it can attract birds if they're going to accommodate you. The other tool, I have an old iPod in a little powered speaker case with an app that has bird songs. So if I hear a bird in the distance and I'm not quite sure if it's really that bird, I'll play that song, blast it, and get a response. It's frowned upon and illegal in state parks. It's illegal to do that in Central Park because there are so many birders. If you think there's a rare bird and you play that song, and there's a group of birders a couple of hedgerows over, and they go, oh my God, it's a spotted owl. And you're going to get hordes of people running over it to try to find it. But the key to doing playback is to be conservative. Conservative to a fault. As soon as you get a response, you want to stop. And you can't have a whole group of people, everybody playing bird songs to try to attract. One person can do it. There are too many stories of birds being harassed, because by me playing that song, tufted titmouse is going to say, there's another male around here, I've got to defend the territory. So you're taking away its energy from feeding, taking care of young. So I want to let the bird know that it won.
Northern cardinal.
The titmouse was a 2-syllable, Peter, Peter, Peter. Cardinal is typically 3 syllables. And highly variable.
Blue jay.
They get such a bad rap. They're in the crow jay family. They're nest robbers, they'll go after eggs, they'll go after baby birds. But Dr. Titus might be able to back me up on this. We're told that the blue jays, the northeastern forests are in large part due to blue jays by caching acorns and forgetting where they've been. Well, there's something more new for your back pocket. Yeah, because they'll take acorns, they'll fly around, they'll hoard them. They'll try to find places where now he's imitating a red-shouldered hawk.
That's what this says. That's what that says.
Which gets us in trouble on our Christmas bird counts. Because red-shouldered hawk, which you'll see later, is a migratory species, but half-hardy. Red-shouldered, it's similar to our red-tailed hawk, but they'll migrate. And in our Christmas bird count, which happens around Christmas time, it's a 2 to 3 week period around Christmas, we will tally red-shouldered hawks on good years if they've stuck around. Sometimes it's not a red-shouldered hawk, but it's a blue jay. And as your Merlin just proved, it's a very convincing imitation. So blue jays are responsible for foresting a lot of New York, a lot of New England. So look at them in a different
So
light.
they're like a crow, I mean, they act like a crow in intelligence, because crows are pretty intelligent.
Yeah, in that pecking order, you got the ravens, crows, and blue jays. And in there too are starlings. Starlings are related to minor birds. So there's sternidae. So you can, I know, and since they're a non-native species, the real name is European starling, people can have starlings as pets. And I've had friends who have had starlings and taught them to talk.
Because I watched a crow once. I used to work at the school, and kids would throw away all kinds of stuff for lunch, rolls and stuff like that. So I would go out and I would feed them, give them what was left over. And so one time I went to my truck and I was eating my lunch, and I'm watching the birds that I put the food out. And the one crow came over and he picked it up and flew over right in front of my truck, so he didn't know I was there, and I'm quiet watching him. And he puts the bread down, and he goes over and he grabs a bunch of leaves and he covers the bread up.
Wow.
And then goes back to get more. And he was hiding that from the other birds. It was just like, I stood there going,
What a great learned behavior.
Yeah, it was just like, I'm gonna save this for later.
Along the lines of bird brains and learned behavior, guys have been down to the Barrier Islands, Barrier Beach, Jones Beach, Rockaway, any Long Island or Jersey Shore. Have you ever seen a gull? Notice I say gull, I don't say a seagull, because we have gulls up here. We'd have to call them parking lot gulls. or bays, so they're bay gulls. If they're bagels, then you need locks and cream cheese. A learned behavior that the gulls at the beaches on Long Island have adopted. They'll pick up a clam, their beak, because they don't have talons, so they have to pick up their beak, fly over the parking lots, drop it, open that quahog, and then they can eat the contents. That's all well and good until they drop it on the windshield of the car, which I've witnessed. And the car is nice and hot from being in the sun in the parking lot, and the windshield is shot.
Downy woodpecker.
So the downy woodpecker is our smallest
Hairy
woodpecker
woodpecker.
that will come to our feeder. But the hairy, you get a sense of the difference in size. Notice the suet cage and the relative size of the downy and relative size. So when we're trying to identify birds by size, you have to use comparisons. If I told you a downy woodpecker is 6 inches and a hairy woodpecker is 7 inches, you got your binoculars and you're looking and the bird's halfway across your yard, and say, stay there, I want to get my tape measure.
Hairy woodpecker.
Okay, stop.
Downy wood.
We already did that. So there are a couple of differences that are, one is relatively easy to see if you want to try to tell the difference between a downy and a hairy. To me, a downy woodpecker shouldn't be called a woodpecker because the beak is so short. If you think of a woodpecker, you think of a long beak. So the beak of a downy is shorter than the distance from the forehead to the back of the head. On a hairy, that beak is more respectable for a woodpecker. And then getting into birding 202 or birding 301, the outer tail feathers of a downy woodpecker, they've got black spots. The hairy doesn't have that. But go by the beak, look for the beak. So when you're trying to, when I get phone calls that I saw a bird in my yard, well, what did it look like? You want to go by color, of course. Look for the shape of the beak, and then you want to say size. So when I say, well, I don't know, maybe it was 8 inches. I say, okay, instead of a number, we'll do a comparison. Is it the size of a sparrow? I don't care what sparrow. Is it the size of a robin? Is it the size of a crow? Is it the size of an eagle or a goose? So that will narrow us down more than just saying, well, I think it was 10 inches or 12, because there are some very subtle differences in a lot of these species.
Down, hair, red-bellied woodpecker,
So when this bird was named, there was already out west a red-naped woodpecker. The back of the head going down to their back is the nape of the bird. So they had to come up with a different name on the East Coast, or east of the Rockies, for this guy. So this little bit of pink, depending on how well you can see it, I wouldn't call it red, it's a diffused patch of pink. And if a bird had a belly button, it would be just above where the legs are. So that's the anatomical belly of a bird. This is the chest. So it is appropriately named. I guess diffusely pink woodpecker was a little bit too much of a mouthful. So it's red-bellied. And the female has a gap in the red. Doesn't go all the way back. It'll come over the forehead, stop about here, and then continue back down. Other than that, they look very similar.
mourning dove,
I could have retired probably on the number of calls if I had $1 for whenever people called and said, I have an owl in my yard.
The robin, do they look, do the male and the female look alike? Because I never see what a robin.
They're similar, yeah, I'll show you exactly.
American goldfinch,
This is what the goldfinch looks like in the wintertime. And typically what we hear when they fly, they say potato chip. And they have an undulating flight, like most woodpeckers. They flap and they stop flapping, so they're dipping. So a way to remember when you hear the bird saying potato chip, you know it's potato chips and dip. This is what we're seeing now. This is the breeding plumage. That's yellow bird with the black wings. Nickname is wild canary.
purple finch,
Purple finch is another conifer-loving species that we don't have here as often as its cousin, which was an introduced species.
house finch,
House finches were out in the West Coast, west of the Rockies, and some people brought them back in cages as cage birds because they have a very canary-like song, and of course they escaped, and they've established a very, very robust population in our country right now. But the house finch and purple finch look very similar. And again, if we get into the big differences, if you see the females of the species, the female purple finch has those really pronounced stripes. The white stripe over the eye, the mustache stripe. The female house finch It's just a nondescript grayish brown bird with subtle streakings. If you see a silhouette of these guys, if they're up on a branch, we're looking for this forked tail. This is going to be on the quiz too.
Okay.
House finch doesn't have that forked tail straight across. To be politically, this is going out broadcast, but I'll do it anyway, I don't care. Politically incorrect, the way that I used to describe the difference between a house finch and a purple finch. If you took a finch, put him in raspberry jelly, let the raspberry jelly drip off very gently, you'd have a purple finch. He's purple all over, raspberry all over. You took that finch and you dipped him in and you shook the dickens out of him, not much purple was left, you got a house finch. We should probably stop saying these things with cancel culture, but it's okay.
Pine siskin.
These guys, when they show up, again, it's an eruptive species. They don't come here to us every winter. Again, they're one of the species, when their seed crop dies, that fails up north, they'll come down to us in droves. And their most favorite food is thistle.
Thistle,
Thistle. Thistle or Niger seed, same thing.
Carolina wren.
What about angry birds? So, I was doing a program for third graders, and we're just talking about the goldfinches, potato chip and dip, want a snack. The third grader said, Mr. Fetterman, Carolina wren wants a snack too. Listen, he's asking for Doritos. Dorito. I'm gonna go back up. I'm gonna do that again.
Carolina wren.
The emphasis is a little on the wrong syllable, but it's close. Dorito. It's 3 syllables, it's a triplet. So there are birds who like to snack. He was chilling.
White-throated sparrow.
So here's old Sam Peabody.
Oh, that's what
Yep. Some individuals are, and there's a tan variety that doesn't have the yellow lure, but has more tan eye stripe, and it blocks out the yellow. Yeah. You know, our field guides are, for the most part, accurate. A lot of the field guides are using photographs these days, or even apps. Unfortunately, those photos are just of a single bird at a single point in time. There's a lot of variation in the coloration of a lot of birds, especially white-throated sparrows. And then there's a subspecies or a color difference where this area is more tan than the stark black and white. So one Valentine's Day, we're sitting in our sunroom, and I looked out, and in with the goldfinches and the other chickadees was a boreal chickadee. This is a bird that breeds in the Adirondacks. And I think at the time, it was the third sighting for Greene County. If you have older field guides, they used to call this a brown cap.
Wild turkey.
It is a bird feeder. The layout of our deck, we have a pool level, we've got a hot tub level, and then we've got the dining level. It's like a cruise ship. I watched this guy come across the yard, jumped up onto the pool deck, jumped up to the next level, came up to this, and worked his way across. I opened the door and had a conversation with him, and he's like, come on, I'm eating here. So I think that's it for the typical feeder birds.
American robin.
This is the song you want to learn, and this will be the basis for comparisons of some other birds that we affectionately call the sing-songers. We'll hear them later. So cheerily, cheery up, cheerily. And the difference that we see in plumage between the male and female robin, he's got more of the brick red, really dark red breast. Female is a lighter shade. So you can see the difference. You'll see. It looks like a bleached out version of the male. And typically, Canadian robins, which we will have here in the wintertime, which is leads me to another issue. In the spring, people say, "Oh, I had a robin in my yard. It's March. I have a robin. Spring's around the corner." Well, I can almost guarantee that the robins that you're seeing in March in Greene County are Canadian robins. Our robins go down to Jersey. And over the 40 years of keeping data on winter movements of birds, we've seen about a 30-mile shift in the large occurrence of robins in New Jersey. They used to go down as far down to Princeton area, and you'd have the biggest abundance, largest abundance of them in that area. Now they're up in the Paramus area. So because of a little shift in temperature of climate change, their range, winter range, has shifted. How do we know the difference between a Canadian robin and an American robin? Well, first, the males are not as starkly colored, as bright and boldly patterned. Also, their song, they say, cheerily, cheery up, cheerily, cheery up, eh? When my wife doesn't come to these programs, she's heard them too.
Wood thrush.
One of the most beautiful songs you can hear. E-ole, do-do-do-do-do-do. E-ole. The CT up in the corner of the slide is climate threatened. So when I'm out doing my bird surveys, I'll make a note of any of these climate threatened birds, just so we know that these are habitats that need more protection than others. Forest flocks, let's say. So the wood thrush is representative of the thrush family, of which the robin is a member. And you see the similarity. I mean, this doesn't look like a robin, really. The posture is the same. And when you see these guys run, the thrushes all run the same. Put their heads down. Work up. So you'll, even if you don't see what kind of thrush it is, you'll at least get to that family. But the juveniles, you ever see a baby robin?
Spotted thrush.
Spotted breast, yeah. Right. So that's reminiscent of a wood thrush. Also on the wood thrush, it's got a reddish hue from the head down to the shoulders, and then brown on the way back.
Veery.
If you listen carefully, you're hearing two notes being sung. So we have a larynx, one voice box. Birds have a syrinx, and it's a split voice box. So he is really singing two notes at the same time. And that's his call, where he gets his name. Veer, veer. Typically where we have wood thrush, you'll have veery. So listen for these guys. It sounds like that corrugated tube, if you swung a tube. Anybody who's been in schools, and you take that and it goes. Yes,
How big is the beard?
robin sized. A little more slender. And it's a reddish brown color from head to tail. I don't know if I have a hermit thrush. The other thrush that we have more at a higher elevation species is a hermit thrush. And we'll have them in the wintertime, fall, winter, early spring. Their reddish is down to the tail. So if you saw a thrush from the back, you could make that differentiation. Again, all these birds we're going to be hearing a lot more than we're going to see them, especially now with full leaf out. I don't have a song for this bird. This is a Bicknell's thrush. It's one of the most endangered species due to climate change. As these guys breed, you can see the very, very small area in New York State, the Adirondacks and the Catskills, elevations over 3,000 feet. It's that Krumholtz habitat up on the top of the mountains, very slow growing evergreens. The problem that we're seeing, and the same issue we're going to see with loons as well, as that habitat changes, because it needs a certain temperature range to grow, these are mountaintop islands. And once that habitat starts to change, it's going to push out the high elevation species. So probably by 2080, 2100, these birds will not be nesting, breeding in the Catskill Mountains. The Adirondacks are a little bit higher, so they still will have a foothold up there. They winter on Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. And over the last 20 years, there's been a major concerted effort to work with the locals to stop deforestation, which is happening all over the Caribbean, Central America, and Mexico. So several ski areas have put up informational kiosks for their visitors to gain an appreciation of where these guys are going in the wintertime, because the ski areas, Hunter Mountain was where Bicknell's thrush has a really good stronghold still. It was first discovered on Slide Mountain. What's the elevation of Slide, 4,040? Something like that. So that's when Eugene Bicknell realized that this bird sang a different song from its cousin, a gray-cheeked thrush, and it was separated.
Your blue spot on the map doesn't coincide with the Catskills, though. It looks like
This little
Putnam
dot
County.
here.
Yeah, that was.
Looks like Putnam County, Rockland County, not the
Yeah,
Catskills.
this is the Massachusetts,
Yeah.
Massachusetts-Connecticut line.
Yeah.
So,
Rural area.
yeah.
It's not this area, because it's too low.
No,
It's
it's
just the high
yeah,
peaks.
the high peaks.
of the Catskills.
I think Merlin's listing them as a wood thrush. That looks like the same bird to me. Does that look like the same bird to you? And they're just listing it as a wood thrush.
The spots, wood thrush is more red, gonna have much more reddish from the head down, and the spots are gonna be more rusty colored. You can take technology so far.
Yeah.
If you put that on eBird, that you were in Cairo and you saw a Bicknell's thrush, you'd have the eBird guy, he'll say, I'll have what you're having.
Yeah.
What was the comment?
The DEC
Right.
would not get on my
It's the
door.
eBird police.
Eastern bluebird,
It's our state bird. And they are in the thrush family. And the family resemblance, again, is in the juveniles, the fledglings. The fledgling bluebirds don't have a beautiful blue head, they don't have the rusty color, they have a speckled chest. And we've done a wonderful job, we, the birding community, the conservation community, in helping bluebirds. Bluebirds are cavity nesters. And with forests being cut down for grasslands or for fields, over the last 25, 30 years, there's been a loss of appropriate housing for bluebirds. So by us putting up bluebird boxes, nest boxes, we've contributed to the increase in bluebird numbers across the whole United States, well, from east of the Rockies, because these are an eastern species. But here in New York, going out the Schoharie Valley, Mohawk Valley, it's made a major difference in helping increase the numbers of eastern bluebirds. And if you are, and kits, you can find bluebird kits everywhere. You can find them at any home goods store. What you want to do is you want to put up 2 bluebird boxes in a similar place, in the same place, and keep them no farther than 10 feet apart. All birds are territorial. There are other cavity nesting birds. I have a picture of tree swallows. Similar habitat. If you put up a bluebird box right on this side of the screen and put a bluebird box on this side, you run a really good chance of attracting a bluebird to one and a tree swallow to the other. If you put them too far apart, then you will get bluebirds or tree swallows defending that whole territory. But by putting them closer together, they will allow the other species to nest close by. There have been experiments done with a single post and bluebird boxes back to back. I don't think there was ever a definitive answer whether that really worked. But installing them no farther than 10 feet apart, you can, with nature there's no guarantees, but I can almost guarantee that you'll get both species. And they're so beneficial. Tree swallows are eating your day flying bugs. Bluebirds are eating stuff that's in your lawn.
You have house wrens in there too.
I'm sorry?
You have house wrens in.
House wrens are a whole other story. If they get into a territory, what happens with house wrens, I've got a picture of them too, they are cavity nesters. They use a smaller opening. The trick to the nest boxes is not necessarily the size of the box, but the size of the opening, right? When the house wrens show up first time in the spring, the males show up, they will start building nests everywhere. Friends gave us a purple martin house. Purple martins are a type of swallow, and it's a very specific habitat. Well, we're in Palinville. I haven't seen a purple martin in Palinville I've been here since '73. So I put it up in the yard, low. Normally you put a purple martin house up 20, 30 feet up in the air. So we put it up. I get house wrens coming in, and there's 8 openings in the box, in the big nest box. The male house wren will build nests in every one of those openings. And then the female shows up, and she'll go from box to opening, hole to hole, and say, nope, I don't like this one. Oh, maybe. And she decides which nest hole, and which compartment she's going to build in. But typically, where we are, so I've got bluebird boxes too. The house wrens don't go to the bluebird boxes because the openings are just too large. So here's a tree swallow.
They compete in my yard.
Yeah. You need to put some more boxes up. Giving you work. So here's a tree swallow in a typical bluebird box. This was down at the Ramshorn Livingston Sanctuary. It's one of my 3 places when I worked for National Audubon. It's down in the village and town of Catskill. These swallows got so used to me. This was before I had a camera with a short lens.
Yeah.
I was probably from here to the nest box. They were so acclimated to me being there, because I was there all the time. This is a youngster, believe it or not. And just like some kids who just didn't know when to leave the home, ready to fledge. But that was the day for this guy. It was right after he got fed, he took off.
I love it when the little birds come over and they're all in a line like that. And Mom comes over, and the little ones are just like fluttering and going, please feed me, feed me. And she's
My turn,
going,
my turn.
get out of here, go find your own.
Already fed you, it's your brother's turn. Another swallow, which has a true swallow tail, a really forked tail, is the barn swallow. Anybody has barns or garages, outbuildings, they'll inhabit those areas. They're not really afraid of being around where people are. And so beneficial, eating gnats, eating mayflies. Again, something you might hear more often than see. So this is our largest woodpecker cavity nester, which is typical of our woodpeckers. What cartoon is he reminiscent of? Woody Woodpecker. woodpecker.
Yeah.
Originally, when, what's his name, Walt Lanz drew Woody Woodpecker, it was some obscure southwestern woodpecker. Didn't have the charisma, the je ne sais quoi of a pileated. So the editor sent him back and said, redo this. So this is about a crow-sized woodpecker.
Yeah.
Big, deep flaps, nice white patches. This is a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Why isn't it playing? Come on, here we go. Typical woodpeckers, you hear the hammering, then really loud, rapid. These guys have a staccato hammering, so we can identify sapsucker when we're doing surveys or out birding just by its hammering. And typically, you see all these holes. They make these machine gun-like holes around a tree, and it's supposed to draw the sap out. And these guys are omnivores. They're not just insect eaters. So they'll lap up the sap, but they're also going to eat the insects that are attracted to the sap. So it's a twofold strategy. I got a call from the gardening editor from the New York Times once and said, I have a reader who has a brown woodpecker with a red patch on the back of the head that's licking sap off of a tree. So I put my thinking cap on and realized, I think I have flicker as the next bird. Yes?
Northern flicker.
Flicker is a very, very, very adaptable bird. It's one of the only woodpeckers that you'll find on the ground. They will seek out and decimate an ant colony. Here, listen to that clear, that's his call in flight. So the bird that the Times person called me about was a flicker that was taking advantage of the drillings of the sapsucker and knew that insects were attracted to the sap. So in the course of my work and my outings, we've come across many birds' nests. And the trick too, and the thing that you need to be aware, you don't want to touch birds' nests or eggs, not because the birds are going to smell you and abandon the nest, but predators would find it. Anything that, like snakes that depend on their sense of smell and taste, they'll realize that humans were there, that there was something attracting them. Mink, red squirrels, they'll find a nest because of our intervention.
Eggs don't give off any odor on their own?
Not that I'm aware of.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Will snakes get up a tree?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. There. Milk snakes can climb. Black rat snakes can climb. Yep. And these guys, those are highly beneficial critters. I would never advocate for killing any snake. And if you had a copperhead in your basement, that's another story. No good deed goes unpunished. There was back last month, there was a black rat snake on my road. And it's about 45 degrees out. The sun was shining. It wanted to take advantage of the sun. And I got out of the car, and she was kind of curled up a little bit. And I gave a little nudge with my foot to see how active was this snake in this temperature. Didn't move, so I thought, okay, I've picked up snakes. I have a respect for them. So I picked it up right behind the head. Everything was cool. I'm holding the snake, and I just wanted to move him off the road. Move him off the road, and as I'm putting him down, he reaches around, and I got a glancing scratch. It tried to bite me. So, but it wasn't a puncture or anything like that. Of course, my wife is freaking out. You should have used a stick, you should have used a stick. Get the alcohol wipe out. Still have 5 fingers. But yes, some snakes do climb. So I discovered this nest. I was able to follow the growth. Here are the babies. I did not sound like the mama, but they still had their mouths open. Eventually, They fledged. And this ungainly looking guy has a really bad hair day. With any luck, will grow into this. Our representative of our marshes, the red-winged blackbird.
They travel someplace in the winter.
They go to Argentina.
Oh.
They go down to South America.
Oh my, because I've seen them when they've all come, you know, oh, the red-winged blackbirds are back. you
So,
know.
as we try to keep track of the phenology, the patterns of nature, I don't go by robins as the harbinger of spring. I go by red-winged blackbirds. And typically, for our latitude, Valentine's Day is when we first see red-winged blackbirds. So maybe up here, a few miles north, but Story Corners, not your stories, this story 3223A, that's when they typically show up, give or take a couple of days. Problem is, they show up in February, there's some food for them. These guys are eating, they're omnivores, they're eating all sorts of stuff. There's lots of snow possibility after February 14. So then these guys will exhibit a reverse migration. They won't go all the way back down to South America. They'll go, a few counties down where they can still hang out. And the other species that shows up typically on Valentine's Day is turkey vulture. So, something to put in your back pocket. Anybody know whose nest this is? Like a hanging softball? Baltimore Oriole.
We had one banging at our window. He landed on the windowsill and banged at the window. Was he looking for a mate or a companion?
He saw his reflection.
He was going around the whole house.
We've had that with cardinals. I did a program at my sanctuary in Dutchess County, and we did a walk with fourth graders. Came back to my car. The whole driver's side window and mirror were totally whitewashed from a cardinal. That was the last time I had an experience like that for a good 10 years. This spring, for the first time, I had a crazy bluebird. And he slimed up every window on the car in the driveway. I resorted to putting plastic up. I got magnets and put plastic up. He found any little opening. And finally I just said, okay, you win. I'll just clean it every day. And then once territory was established, he had his mate, he stopped. But I had never experienced that with a bluebird. Cardinals, robins, yep.
bobolink,
So males on the right, females on the left. This is one of the really critical birds that depend, they're grassland species. So we've seen that 30 to 40% decline in bobolink numbers. I call this guy the R2D2 bird. Doesn't it sound like R2D2?
bobolink,
Kind of, sort of. So how come he looks the way he does and she looks the way she does? What's going on with that? Anybody know? These guys breed in grasslands, hayfields. So she's going to take advantage of her cryptic coloring, camouflage, while she's raising her young. In most of our bird species, if there is going to be a color difference between males and females, it's called sexual dichromatism. There's one group of birds, it's a duck-like bird called a phalarope, P-H-A, phalarope, where the male is the lesser colored individual. The female has the bright colors. What do you think's up with that? He takes care of the young. He incubates the eggs and he tends to the young. So he's the one who's camouflaged. But in all other birds, it's the male that's the brightly colored.
In all other birds? All? There's only one that has this?
There might be some South American tropical species.
And which
But-
bird was this again?
Phalarope. There's,
Phalarope.
yeah, there are several species of phalaropes with a PH.
Eastern meadowlark,
Spring of the year. Another grassland bird that is suffering such declines because of loss of habitat.
Eastern towhee,
Anybody like coffee instead? He says, drink your tea. Some of the words we put to songs really work. And some are a stretch. This might be familiar to a lot of you guys. These birds love to make nests over our porch lights,
Yeah.
on entranceways, over garages.
Yeah.
Eastern phoebe.
Oh, Phoebe.
It's one of our flycatchers, and it's one of the earliest arriving migrants in the spring. So after the redwings have shown up, the phoebes will show up, usually by March 1st. And you'll watch for this pretty, more or less nondescript bird, but they wag their tail or pump their tail.
Like a,
Just, boom, boom. Yep. They don't use it like a woodpecker would as a support. It's just one of their behaviors.
Eastern kingbird,
One of the larger flycatchers in the area. Kind of sounds like electricity going through wires. Identified by more of a contrasty black head and these white tail feathers, the base end of the tail. So we're identifying birds. There are a lot of things we can look for. Some birds have a very specific flight pattern, like our woodpeckers. They have an undulating flight, just like the goldfinch. And what does the goldfinch say? Potato chip. Okay, good. You'll pass the quiz.
Thank you.
Kingbird flies on the tips of its wings. So if you see a bird over a field, and he's not hovering, he just flies on the tips of his wings. And it's an interesting
There is a
strategy.
bird that does that.
There
fluff
are-
That hangs over.
Yep, kestrels, our little falcon, will hover. Red-tailed hawks do a rigid hovering. Yep. Kingfishers, you'll see along streams. They're like blue jays on steroids. The kingbird has a distinctive, and typically of most of these flycatchers, they will find a perch, fly out, grab an insect, because they're flycatchers, they're going after flying insects. Grab the insect and come back, if not that exact perch, but one right nearby. So you can just by the behavior, you'll know it's a flycatcher. At least that'll get you in that family. So we talked about the thrushes. But what did that sound like?
Catbird.
What color is he?
Gray.
So what's his full name?
Gray catbird.
Gray catbird. He's in a family called mimic thrushes. And in that family, we've got the catbird, easily identified as a nice gray bird with this is called the vent of a bird. Nice rusty colored underneath. In different light, you see a black cap. He's got a decent repertoire. They call them mimic thrushes because they mimic other bird songs and calls. So they've got all sorts of chirps and chips and songs, and then their call is that distinctive meow.
Do they come back to the same places, or just be a whole?
Most birds come back to where they were hatched. They have hatched nest dedication, which is really remarkable. I mean, think about it. Birds this big, how big is that brain? Think of a hummingbird. A hummingbird that is breeding here in Cairo goes all the way down to Central America, and then comes back in the spring to the same yard patch. And it makes that flight across the Gulf of Mexico in one night. Notice I said night. All of our migrating songbirds migrate at night. safety in the dark. They're not subject to predation as much, well, they're not subject to predation at all when they're flying at night. Maybe owls, but they're flying at elevation. They're thousands of feet up. Owls are not going to be up there. So yes, the catbird that
Many
you
in big
heard
flocks.
last year is either the same one or the offspring of the.
I've been tracking this, several birds in my yard for several years now.
Yeah.
It just as, what you're saying, hummingbirds?
Yep.
Yeah, after 3 years, one hummingbird, he has not come back.
They don't have a long lifespan. And it's dangerous migrating. They've got to fend against weather, against predators, find enough food. So migration is not an easy thing. They can't get in the car, put the GPS on, and say, okay, I'm gonna drive 3 hours, I got a rest area here on the turnpike. Yeah. These guys they live 4 to 5 years typically. The smaller the bird, the shorter.
45?
Four.
Four. I'm sorry.
Parrots may be 45 years.
Northern
Mass-
mockingbird,
Master mimic is they have over 100 song repertoire. And not only bird songs, but here that was a catbird imitation, that was a red-shouldered hawk imitation, titmouse, almost like a blue jay. I was up in Coxsackie one time, behind the Serta mattress factory, the cul-de-sac off of 9W. And I'm ready to go out in the grassland, and I heard the Serta alarm go off, their emergency alarm. And I'm expecting to see all the workers start coming out. Nobody's coming out. And I waited, and I saw the mockingbird on the corner of the building. It was so convincing. So there are 3 species in this mimic thrush family: the catbird, mockingbird, and the brown thrasher.
brown thrasher,
He repeats his phrases twice. Everything he says twice. He kind of looks like a wood thrush, but instead of having the spots, he's got streaks. He's got a much longer tail and a longer curved beak. I pat myself on the back for this picture.
He's actually got a buggy's different.
Yeah.
Little seed. Yeah.
Oh, he's my new favorite bird. He says everything twice. That's my new favorite bird.
So you'll hear mockingbirds with similar calls and songs as a thrasher, but when you hear them say that twice, you know it's a thrasher.
scarlet
You
tanager,
had red-winged blackbird before? This is a black-winged redbird. What does a robin sing? Cheerily, cheery up, nice and sweet sounding. Listen to how buzzy this guy sounds. So in the early bird field guides, the description was, sounds like a robin with a sore throat. And his call was this chick purr. I have to add the picture of the female. You won't be impressed. She's about the color of this green blending into this green. It doesn't have any of the red or black. Another bird that is on our list of we're concerned about, there's a list of birds. So you know about endangered species, we know threatened, we know species of special concern. Those are the 3 designations. There's another group called species of greatest conservation need. These are birds that are relatively abundant right now, but based on all of the data we've been seeing, the numbers are declining. Scarlet tanager is in that group of greatest concern. So when I'm doing my bird surveys, the consulting surveys, I take latitude, longitude, I mark on the map where I find wood thrush, scarlet tanagers, there's several other birds, just so we have a better handle on who's where at this point in time. So he's like a robin with a sore throat.
rose-breasted grosbeak,
is, they say it's a robin who took singing lessons. And again, here's the male, brightly colored, and then the female, so she can be camouflaged in her nest. And what's interesting, a lot of this, most of it's interesting to me, you hear that squeak? It's like a sneaker on the gym floor. That'll tip you off that there's a grosbeak around. So I've got these guys on the shepherd's hook at my bird feeders. They're not really bird feeder birds. They're not like chickadees or titmice or nuthatches. But when they first arrive for migration, they'll come to our feeders. They are hungry and they know they can get a quick meal. And you know, people will ask me, I had rose-breasted grosbeaks in my yard last week, but now they're gone. They must have moved on. I said, they're probably still in your yard. They're just not at your feeder. Listen for them. And then I'll get a call 2 weeks later. Yep, they're up there singing.
Indigo bunting.
Same thing with the indigo bunting. They'll show up, come to the feeders, and then after a couple of days, they've stocked up enough, and then they're just up in the treetops. This one's a stretch. Fire, fire, where? Put it out, put it out.
Song sparrow.
I think that was one of the most prevalent common birds that I've been noting on the surveys that I've been doing recently. The bird of scrubby fields, grasslands, pretty much a generalist. We've got a savanna sparrow, which is a grassland bird. You'll find them where you find the meadowlarks and bobolinks. And main difference between the song sparrow and the savanna is they've got yellow lures right between the beak and the eye. And if you turned a little bit, you'd see he's got a forked tail, kind of like the purple finch. So you can tell them in silhouette as well. Tibbity, say. This is a field sparrow. Anybody play ping pong? It's been years. Think of a ping pong ball dropping. Can you do that again for me? No. Thought he was going to play again. When we look at sparrows, you're trying to identify these LBJs, little brown jobs. We look for whether it has a streaked chest or a clear chest. In the case of the song sparrow, he's got a streaked chest and a stick pin, a big dot in the middle. And most of our sparrows, actually all of our sparrows except for the field sparrow, they all have dark colored beaks. The field sparrow has a flesh colored beak. In the wintertime, these guys are replaced with tree sparrows. Tree sparrows are northern breeders. They'll come down in our area in the wintertime, and the tree sparrow has a bicolored beak. Looks very similar to a chipping sparrow, which we have in the summertime, except the chipping sparrow has the same upper mandible and lower mandibles are the same colors. So in the winter, and you wouldn't expect to see a tree swallow in July where we are, and you wouldn't expect to see a chipping sparrow in January where we are. Now we get into what we like to call the butterflies of the bird world. The wood warblers, these guys, the colors run the gamut from yellows to blues to greens to oranges. This is a yellow warbler. Sweet, sweet, sugar is sweet. The female looks identical to him, but doesn't have the rusty chestnut streaks. So a wet area bird along streams, along marshes.
Common yellowthroat.
Another wetland bird. A lot of variation in this guy's song. Sometimes his his emphasis is on the different syllable. He'll say, which is it, which is it, which is it? Most of the bird books will say, whichity, whichity, whichity. Which is it, which is it, which is it? He's the Zorro bird.
Are they small birds?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. About sparrow size, but more slender. And these guys you'll find up in the canopy. They're looking for inchworms. They're looking for anything you'd find up in the leaves.
Black and white warbler.
Appropriately named. Sounds like a squeaky wheel. The zebra bird. This is an American red star. It's got orange patches on the kind of shoulder area and then along the tail. Choo 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 ka-choo.
Chestnut-sided warbler.
Appropriately named. Use a stretch. Please, please, pleased to meet you. Some bird names work. Yes. Some are a stretch.
Yellow-rumped warbler.
So this guy got his name from the yellow patch. So the rump of a bird, it's not underneath where it would be pooping, that's the vent. This area of the bird is called the rump. It's where the tail meets the body. So his nickname is Butterbutt. Depending on the light, this guy can either be flame orange or orangish yellow. The black Burnian warbler. They love pine oak forests. We've got them breeding in Palinville. They're around they have a really cool song, kind of goes up that. So we've had yellows represented. We've had black and white.
Oven bird.
One of you retired teachers. Teacher, 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 teacher. He gets his name from the kind of nest that he builds, or she builds. It's in the shape of an old Dutch oven. Nice domed structure on the ground with a side opening.
So it's a ground nester?
Yep, it's their ground nester.
On a shelf outside our kitchen door.
I'm sorry?
On a shelf outside our kitchen door.
That's where he's built his nest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be suspect that it was an oven bird, because they're more of a deep woods breeder. We don't typically see them around human activity.
It's got a root on its nest.
Huh. I'd love to see a picture of it. Is that possible? That would, if I could get a picture of that?
Oh, probably.
Probably. Okay, I'll give you a card before we.
Oven bird.
Yes. Those guys are prairie warbler. We'll see them along 23 near the Agroforestry Center. It's like running your finger on a comb. Do that again for me.
Black-throated green warbler.
Z. Green, 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 I'm so green.
Red-eyed vireo.
So, cousin to the warblers are the vireos, not to be confused with the viri in the thrush family, but this is V-I-R. These red-eyed vireos, we want to tell them to stop singing. They will start early in the morning, and when any other self-respecting bird stops singing, usually by 10:30, 11 o'clock, because it's getting too warm for them, they've fed and everything is fine, these birds will continue to sing continuously. Here I am, where are you? Here I am, I'm up here. Here I am, where are you? I just want to say, and if I have Merlin up listening, you can set Merlin that it will highlight the last heard song as opposed to doing a list.
Oh.
So that, I can show you how to set that in settings, because that's really handy.
Yeah.
In a forest where you have red-eyed vireo and there's other things going on, Merlin comes up, red-eyed vireo, and then something else, red-eyed vireo.
It does, I
You
get this,
just want to stop.
anytime I'm out, yes,
Yeah.
listening to the catbirds and
Yep.
but it's constantly coming back to this one, so I know that, I realize it's telling me there's multiple species
These
hanging
guys have a
around.
relatively small territory. So where you might have, in a patch in your woods, you might have one wood thrush territory, you could have 3 or 4 red star red-eyed vireo territories. So these, again, just like the wood warblers, these are insect eaters.
Good.
The beaks are a little bit.
Blue-headed vireo.
So this used to be called a solitary vireo. He at least says something and takes a breath. Here I am. I'm up here. Here I am. I'm up here. Easily identified with his white spectacles. Everybody knows the only breeding hummingbird in the east is the ruby-throated hummingbird. In the fall and the winter, we've been visited by western hummingbirds, especially rufous hummingbirds that get driven east. We tend to think they're driven east by weather occurrences, band storms, because most of our weather patterns go from west to east. And that's why western birds typically will show up in our neck of the woods. But this time of year, we'll only have ruby-throated hummingbirds.
Through the summer?
Through the summer,
Oh.
yep. They're usually gone by the second week of September. But don't stop feeding. Don't put your hummingbird feeders away until mid-October, because you might get a rare western visitor.
So I have a tree that blooms in August, and all August, they're just different ones collecting.
Yep, you've got the female doesn't have the beautiful ruby throat. And then the juveniles will have any variation of the red as those feathers start to come in. So you might think you have different species, but they're all ruby throats in August.
Well, through the binoculars, it's almost hard to see, as they're being hit differently in the light.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
going, what color are you? I don't know.
Iridescence.
I'm
Sometimes it
looking
looks
to be-
black.
You're a hummingbird.
Yeah, sometimes the gorget looks black.
Very dark.
So this is a golden crowned kinglet, a little bit larger than a hummingbird. And typically we don't see the golden crown except if it's agitated. And it can raise that golden crown as a little crest. Or again, I think a second grader said, talking about a tufted titmouse, said, it's got a mohawk. So the golden crowned kinglet's cousin is a ruby crowned kinglet. Listen to the song out of this guy. It's like a 4-part song.
That's a great photo.
Cute.
House wren.
Here's our nice bubbly song. So where do you find cattails? In the marsh. Right. So this is a marsh wren. Again, a nice bubbly song. So we go from the smallest birds to one of the largest we have around here, the pterodactyl,
Yeah.
a great blue heron. And its cousin. This is the great egret. They typically don't breed in the Hudson Valley by us. They'll breed up in the Mohawk Valley, and usually the third week of August, we see them migrating through. So we've had these guys in springtime migration, we've seen them at Ramshorn, back in some of the interior marshy areas. The name of this guy has changed a few times, so I'll always call him a green heron. One of the names that, I don't know if he's called a green-backed heron now, because the back is green. So he's related to the great blue, but a lot smaller. He's about the size of a crow. And if you're in a marshy area and you think a crow flying across, look for a bird that has bowed wings. Crows tend to fly, their wings kind of row the crow. These birds have more of a bowed wing and more of an up and down flap.
Virginia rail.
Elusive bird of the marsh. Look at the size of those toes. That's for navigating the cattail marshes. That's called their grunting call. So down in Ramshorn, we have these guys breeding, and I'll use my iPod to play their song and their grunting sound. And they come right out and across the trail. They answer. Got to a point a few years ago, actually more than a few years ago, I played the song once and play the grunting once and get a response. I went down there, I was on my own, I didn't have a group with me, and I tend to talk to myself. I said, well, I wonder if that rail's gonna come out today for me. And I start to take out the iPod. It responded just to my voice. It came out. It was so acclimated. Good question.
The last name, Rail,
Rail.
like, okay, Rail.
R-A-I-L.
Never seen that or heard of it.
They're very elusive, very specific in marshes, cattail marshes, wetlands. They're only about this big. And the expression thin as a rail, we like to adopt that saying. It's not as thin as a railroad rail, but a rail, if he was facing us, it would look like this really slender little thing. Again, a strategy to be able to navigate through the cattail and other marsh vegetation. Another rarely seen bird of marshes, usually very, very cryptically hidden.
American bittern.
Bitter?
Bittern. Yep. In some books they say it sounds like an old steam engine starting up. Well, typically we think of shorebirds, sandpipers and plovers. We think of them by the ocean. This is a spotted sandpiper, and they'll nest along lakes inland, not just out on the seashores.
What's the one that fakes it,
Coming
a
up.
broken, a broken leg?
You're jumping the gun. So this is the nest of the bird that runs off.
Killdeer.
This is the killdeer.
You hear them at night.
Right there, later in the day, we'll hear them flying off. The killdeer is a ground nester, for lack of a better word. It's just a scrape in a field. They'll nest on construction sites. They're not very, very, very smart with it. They nest a lot of times. I think they nested on top of the Durham Elementary building one year. And the babies fell off. This was a nice gravel-looking flat roof. And they do a display to lure you away from where they're nesting. They put their wing out. I had a yellow warbler do that to me last week. I was walking along a hedgerow, and I heard the yellow warblers, and sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet, and I look up, and he starts flying, landed on the ground, put both wings out, and it wasn't a juvenile begging for food. It was typically, the juveniles will put their wings out and go, come on, feed, feed. And he was trying to lure me away.
Mallard.
It's a pair of wood duck. It's a female. Male wood duck looks like somebody painted. Just went crazy with the colors. Yeah, maybe I'll add some green here, maybe orange here. What you were hearing was the female. He's got the looks, she's got the voice. He makes a couple little squeaky type sounds here and there, but when they're flying, she's the one who's vocalizing. And I guess in this case, she was saying, come on, stay with me. Stay with me.
Why are you barking here?
So the wood ducks are cavity nesters. We've been successful in helping them in wetland swamp areas. This is a hooded merganser, so more or less a fishing duck. They've got teeth-like ridges, and they're also cavity nesters. And what we've found in a lot of places, we found hooded mergansers laying eggs in the same box as wood duck. Because as we're studying and monitoring the wood duck boxes, we can see the comings and goings of the wood ducks. And then come fledging time, typically the birds, the boxes or the cavities are right by water, or close to it. The babies jump out, and if they're by the water, they go right in the water, or they'll land in the leaf litter, and little ping pong balls dropping out. We found a nest with hooded merganser babies intermingled with wood duck babies. So we don't know who was incubating who for however duration, but it was a mixed
One mom
species
got
group.
lazy and said, oh, you
Yeah,
take care
that
of
was
the
good
kids.
duck. Yeah. Well, they're local.
Red-tailed hawk.
So anytime you see a raptor, a bird of prey on TV, in the movies, they always play a red-tailed hawk. Whether it's showing a peregrine falcon, a bald eagle, they always play a red-tailed hawk. Because that's, I have an eagle coming up, but you'll hear why they do red-tailed hawk. So this is the most common of the soaring hawks. If you get binoculars up on them, you'll notice these black marks on the leading edge of the wing. No other soaring raptor has those black marks. And of course, you'll see the rusty red tail, but first year red-tailed hawk doesn't have a red tail. So it will confuse you. And then they always say, look for the belly band. Well, just like we're all human beings, individuals, we have different hair color, different skin color. Red-tailed hawks have varying amounts of that belly band. Some will be really dark and pronounced, and some will be really light. But looking at these black patagial mark, you can say almost near the wrist of the bird, that's the diagnostic for a red tail.
I was sitting out early in the morning and I'm watching the birds and they're all upset. They're just like flying around and screeching and everything. And all of a sudden my eye caught something under the pine trees and it was a red-tailed hawk. He had caught a bird.
Oh, wow.
And they were so upset about the whole thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing to use nature as cues.
Yeah.
Listen for crows.
Yeah.
If crows and blue jays start making a ruckus in the woods, chances are there's something out there, whether it's a cat
A cat, my
Or-
cat would do the same thing.
or some
They
predator or
all
something,
upset,
that,
yeah.
or us,
Yeah.
or more typically there's an owl around, or some other raptor, yeah.
Red-shouldered hawk.
Or blue jay. These guys prefer more moist woodlands, so where you find barred owls, you'll find red-shouldered hawks.
We've got a nest of these guys, and the smaller birds will chase them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess they're different, you know.
Even though the favorite food for the red-shouldered hawk and red-tailed hawks are rodents, rabbits.
Snakes.
Now snakes, red shoulders love snakes.
Oh, yeah.
There was a nest, anybody remember Betty Miller? Betty Miller, she was one of the founders of Northern Catskills Audubon. She had a little farmette on Cairo Junction Road, and she had nesting red shoulders above their barn. And I got a picture of them pre-digital camera. The male kept coming back. He found a mother load of frogs. He would come to the nest, watching him drop the frog, took off, went off, and come back not 5 minutes later with another frog. And then we get into the true hawks. These are the accipiters. These are the guys with the relatively shorter wings, longish tail. There are 3 of these. These are the true woodhawks. These guys are the bird aficionados. They're built for pursuing birds in flight. Just like typically the peregrine falcon. But these guys can maneuver. You might want to Google a video of them flying through the woods, how they can go through tight spaces. So they come in 3 varieties, 3 sizes. A small one that's about the size of a large blue jay. This is a sharp-shinned hawk. Its cousin is a Cooper's hawk. And if you saw these guys side by side, notwithstanding the size, you would say they look identical. But the big identifying features on these guys, the wings on a Cooper's, the leading edge goes straight across.
Oh.
On a Cooper, on a sharp-shinned, it's usually a very pronounced S curve. And then the other thing, this tail is straight across. This tail is a little more rounded. And in freshly molted, freshly feathered out birds, there's a nice band of white at the end of the Cooper's hawk tail. But nothing is definitive. This bird can be an older bird, and the feathers are worn. It doesn't show the white. But one of the best diagnostic that I use is how they flap. A sharp-shinned hawk, all these guys do a flap, flap, soar. Flap, flap, soar. A sharp-shinned has a very frenetic, and then sets its wing. Cooper's hawk is a little more definitive. Yeah, here I come. And then we've got the granddaddy of the accipiters, the northern goshawk. Oops, I went the wrong way. This is about the size of a red-tailed hawk. So a Cooper's is the size of a crow. This guy's the size of a red tail. And the descriptions say it's like a stovepipe from the head down to the tail. And when this guy flies, you just see a big soaring bird, but it maneuvers through the woods. If you're following a bird over a field, a hawk, and you don't know if you have a goshawk or a red tail, if the bird continues and goes straight into the woods, like 10 feet, 20 feet up, goes through the trees, it's going to be one of these guys, either a Cooper's hawk, a sharp-shinned, or the goss. If the bird goes up and over the woods, because the red tails, they don't have the maneuverability of these accipiters. Another bird we're very concerned about is another bird of grasslands. This guy used to be called a marsh hawk. You have an older field guide. It's called a northern harrier. I should say this gal, because this is the female. They have their wings up in a V, in a dihedral, and they have what looks like a methodical hunting strategy. They go across a field and they double back, kind of like they're doing search and rescue. And they're looking for meadow voles and mice and small birds. So this is the female. She's brown streaked. That's the same species. This is the male. And his nickname is the Gray Ghost. And we've been doing concerted efforts to monitor these guys because they are a threatened species. And the grassland habitat, as we know, we're losing it. Up in Coxsackie with all of the solar projects, we've been working with the DEC on monitoring northern harriers, and an owl species that comes down in the wintertime, a short-eared owl. They use our grasslands. So we're actively involved in keeping track of their numbers. This is a young peregrine falcon. So it's the largest of the falcons that we have here. In fact, I heard that they closed the walkway over the Rip Van Winkle Bridge.
Yep.
Because the peregrines, I love the language, the hyperbole. They're angry, they're mean. No, they're nesting on the bridge.
Yeah.
And we've been putting, DEC's been putting platform up on the Greene County side for their nesting endeavor. So of course they're flying around. The babies have fledged, so it's going to be a short-lived closure. So the peregrine is the largest of the falcons, the medium-sized falcon. The peregrine used to be called a duck hawk. This guy used to be called a pigeon hawk. This is a merlin. And then our little guy. This is the kestrel. Just read an article in the Times about kestrels. Kestrels are suffering a major decline. I've been talking about this for 30 years, and it's finally, over the last 5 years, I've gotten a little traction with my complaining. They're cavity nesters, so we started a kestrel nest box project in proper habitats, grassland areas. And the Times article said it's not just a lack of cavities, of old dead snags with holes. It's their food source. Their number one food source is grasshoppers. And I noticed, it was crazy, all the fields that I was walking on, this project I'm working on this week, I didn't encounter one grasshopper. It was one of those eye-opening moments. And I was in hay fields, the hay was up this tall to, I forget what grass they called it, it was about knee-high. It was a lack of grasshoppers. I found, so far in 7 days of surveying, I found only one kestrel. And half the property, half the habitats I was on has been open meadows. So one of the big things is by reducing the use of Roundup, glyphosate. All of these herbicides, pesticides, we've got to stop using them. Who's awake? Me too. A great horned owl with a youngster. These we don't hear as often as we hear the barred.
Barred owl.
Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?
Yes, that's what it is. They make weird noises.
And then all of these hoots and hollers, kind of sounds like monkeys at times. Yep.
Eastern screech owl.
Doesn't screech. It's got a whinny and a trill. In the right area, they will nest in wood duck boxes. Or just hang out in wood duck boxes, just use them as a roost box. These guys come in a red plumage or a gray plumage. Turkey vulture.
There's
Yeah.
a good group of them here in Carroll,
Oh,
along the
boy.
bypass,
Yeah.
there's ones that circle there all the time.
So typically we would say V for vulture, and the wings are up in a V, the fancy word is a dihedral, and you'd be safe saying, oh, V for vulture. Well, over the last 20 years, due to range expansion, we now have black vultures in our area. Wings aren't as long, they're not up in a dihedral as much, the tail is shorter, and they have the white primary feather tips. And a lot of times, I don't know what the strategy is, maybe to dry their feet, but they'll fly with their feet hanging out, just hanging down below their bodies. And they tend to be more accepting of people coming by. Typically, when you see turkey vultures on a carcass on the side of the road or in a field, you stop, and as soon as they know you're there, they take off. Black vultures stand their ground. This is an osprey. The diet is 99% fish. And they're so good at fishing, bald eagles hang out where ospreys hang out, so they can chase the osprey and try to get them to give up the fish. For the first time in 40 years, about 4 or 5 years ago, we finally got an osprey to nest in our reach of the Hudson River. They finally nested off of Brandow's Point, off of 385, on one of the navigation markers. We put up a platform under the Rip Van Winkle Bridge, because you'll see them in Florida, you'll see them on Long Island. We post some of the big platforms. Easy to attract them. Just totally unsuccessful in the Hudson Valley just until a few years ago. Now we're seeing them. I know of 4 nests between Sorgeties and Coxsackie. And these guys are one of the success stories. I call it the irreverent triumvirate. When DDT was banned, we saw the resurgence of bald eagles, peregrine falcons, and osprey. Because as the top of the food chain, the apex predators, the DDT was accumulating in their bloodstream. All 3 of these species were laying eggs when the shells were just too soft, and the eggs they weren't incubatable. So we lost DDT and we've gained peregrines, ospreys, and bald eagles. A rare visitor to our area is the golden eagle. Easily identified by white at the base of the tail feathers here, and usually white patches under the wing. But young bald eagles, like this one, look very similar to a golden eagle. But notice how big that head is. The head of the beak, how far they protrude ahead of the wings. I'll go back to the golden eagle. So the head, to me, when I see golden eagles flying, it looks to me like a giant red-tailed hawk, proportionally. So this is, I think this was a 1-year-old bird. A lot of times we can try to age the birds, not just by the color of their plumage, but by their molt pattern, when the feathers are dropped and new feathers grow in. But this is a juvenile, a young bald eagle, and hopefully
Bald
grow into
eagle.
this guy. This is why they play a red-tailed hawk. That's so majestic.
We live near the Catskill Creek,
Yeah.
and they nest right there on the Catskill Creek
Yep.
and fish.
So this was a New York hatched bird. I'm trying to make out a blue band. And it's like, so as the eagle flies off to the west, it concludes my slideshow. We have time for questions?
Sure.
Yes.
I've got a nice photograph that I took of a bald eagle sitting in a tree right across the creek from Debbie's father's runway, and here, right here in South Carroll.
Nice.
There's quite a few of them down there.
When are you seeing bald eagles?
We used to see it in the wintertime.
Okay, well,
Around here, it's hit and miss. Sometimes it comes through. Douglas County has a winter population near Pine Plains. If you really want to experience them, we go up to Oneonta in November. Franklin Mountain Sanctuary. It's run by Delaware Otsego Audubon. And they have golden eagles coming through migrating. When the winds are right, they can have double-digit migration of golden eagles.
Hummingbirds, what's this whole deal with them swooping like this?
Isn't that
They're doing
great?
weird things.
It's called the pendulum flight. It's defending a territory or trying to impress a female. I had a hummingbird just a couple of weeks ago when it first arrived. I was standing on my deck, and there were no females around. And this hummingbird was doing the pendulum thing and making a sound I had never heard from a hummingbird before. I can't even describe it. Usually it's a bunch of squeaks and whistles.
Was it like a little chatter or something? No.
I've heard chatter before, but it was just a sound that I had never heard from a hummingbird.
Gotta pay attention to that.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any mention of whippoorwill.
Few and far between. They have suffered an incredible population
When I
loss.
was a kid, they were abundant.
And that's the phrase, when I was a kid. And you know, by us being,
I live outside of Schenectady now, in Rosedale, and it's probably been about 10 years since I saw one or heard one
Yeah.
there. And in my area, there are quite a few hayfields yet, but still, whippoorwills have kind of disappeared.
they have.
The other thing that you didn't mention that I have seen around here, but more abundant up in Schenectady, is a saw-whet.
Yeah, they're elusive as well. I've got a friend up, I guess, Feather-Cairo, who says they're nesting in his yard. They're the smallest of our owls. Our little screech owl is a little type.
They're a third the size of a screech owl.
I'm sorry?
They're about a third the size of a
Yeah,
screech owl.
yeah. Yep, and they make a tooting call. Have yet to experience one down here.
I picked up one 2 years ago, I guess, that I let it sit there for a while, and it did fly off, but it had flown into one of my garage doors for some reason.
Huh.
I could see it coming right against the garage door, landed on the ground, and I thought it was dead. I went and picked it up, it was still alive, I set it off to the side, eventually got up and flew on.
Cool. Good job.
A couple years ago, from the kitchen window on our bird feeder, there was a bird about the size of a blue jay, had about the same crown, except that the whole back of it was a taupe color. And the breast and near the eye, above and below, was like a stripe of the orange. The breast was orange. We looked at the Audubon site, we tried to check books that we had, never saw anything like it since. It's a fairly large bird.
Yeah. Take a look at gray crested flycatcher.
I don't think so.
No?
I didn't see it.
He didn't see it.
She described it to me.
Yeah.
He told me I was crazy.
One thing has nothing to do with the
The
other.
taupe color was so beautiful, and then the contrasting breast was orange. The color.
I thought that, from her description, it sounded like cedar waxwing, but the colors weren't exactly right, but
And the color.
You know,
vibrant.
sunlight plays a big role in how intense colors are going to be or not. You know, that was going to be my second, but you know, with the crest,
It had a crest.
yeah, but with a little bit of a mask type look,
Yeah.
cedar waxwing is a good possibility. Yeah, especially if you describe it like that.
from her description,
Yeah.
the cedar waxwing was the closest thing I could come up with.
Yeah.
But she said the colors weren't just right, but I didn't see it.
What time of year?
I think it was the fall. I think.
Could have been possibly a Bohemian waxwing,
I
a
don't know.
larger cousin that breeds in the Adirondacks. They
But
show
it
up
was
down here.
Beautiful and so large. I mean, it was, I was yelling for him, come here, because I'd never seen anything like it and never have again.
They're real active now, the cedar waxwings. I should add waxwings to the slideshow.